Hello, good afternoon everybody. Welcome back to the plenary session of the Open Science Festival. As you can see, we're here in The Hague with a group of people around the table. It's quite rare in these days, but very fortunate that we're able to do this in a safe way. I hope you enjoyed the parallel sessions, the community-led sessions that you've had after the opening. A warm welcome, of course, also to those who are here now for the first time in the festival. So what we are going to do is, in this part of the program, we have 3 sessions with live guests. We also have videos of guests who ask questions to the people we have here around the table. In the first session, we will talk about the current developments in open science. Then we have a second session where we talk with researchers, and we will end with a session on future developments and policies around open science. We use a Mentimeter, as I explained earlier, to be in contact with you. So please use, if you have a question to me or to the people around the table, please use Menti for that. The code for that is 5559534. There are also instructions on the website, opensciencefestival.nl, if you need help with that. So the first conversation is about the current developments in open science, and I have 3 guests here at the table. You already met the co-host, Karel Luybe, but we also have Kim Huipen, who is the program manager for the Dutch National Program on Recognition and Rewards of Academics, and we will talk about rewards and recognition in open science with Kim. And we also have Sarah de Rijke, who is the director of CWTS in Leiden, that does research on research evaluation. But before we go into a conversation with them, I would like to ask Karel. Karel, you joined some of the sessions. So you're the national coordinator of open science. So what did you take away from the sessions, the community-led sessions?
Yeah, Marco, I didn't take away much content, of course, but I visited 9 of the parallel sessions. There were twice 12 parallel sessions, so there were a lot of them. And a few things that struck me in most of these sessions is that a very large percentage of the participants were young scientists. So researchers at a, for me, relatively young age. I'm one of the oldest ones, but you could see that there is definitely an eagerness to be involved, to learn about what open science is and what open science could offer. And there was a widespread in the number of participants. The more specific topics, some of the parallel sessions on software, for example, there were smaller groups, up to sometimes even 3, but also there were sessions with more than 30 people being present. And then another thing that struck me was that they were very concrete. The sessions were about topics people have chosen, and they were, in some cases, even actively working during the session themselves. So doing, let's say, work together in order to do exercises on certain topics. So all in all, I think a very lively set of parallel sessions that really contributes to making people aware of the possibilities, necessities of open science.
Very good to hear. Now you prepared a video on open science, and we didn't show that in the first part, so maybe now's a good opportunity to do that.
Yeah, video is maybe a big word, Marco, but a small animation that I would like to show. Could we start the animation with 2 definitions? If we want to move from the present day of doing science to the new way of doing science, we have to move towards more open access, towards more use of fair data, and towards more involvement of citizens. Could we stop the animation here for a second? These 3 developments jointly are what I would call the development towards what you could call Science 2.0, whatever you want to call it. But this transition is what I call the open science. And of those 3, I think towards fair data is the type of transition which takes most of the effort, most of the time, in order to bring across. The open access transition is not ready at all, but we've been working on that for 2003 or something like that, so a long, long time. And citizen science is even more recent, let's say, addition to the tree of activities you could see under open science. All three of them are important. Could we start the animation again? Because there are a number of boundary conditions that are essential in order to get this development going. One is to have skills, especially in the data domain, that make it possible for people to do what they are supposed to do if they want to produce fair data. Another one, and we will discuss that in a minute also, is the reward and recognition system. If that doesn't change, and if we stick too much, could we stop the animation again here? If we stick too much to the present rewards and recognition system, then things are not going to move. And three is what is called metrics here, another topic we may be discussing in a minute. In order to do this transition, we have to move and we have to be able to measure that. Then another definition I would like to share with you is that the difference between open data and fair data. Open data, as it says, is open. You can use it, you can share it, you can reuse it. And if you are publicly funded researcher, could we stop the animation here so we stick with this slide? If you're a publicly funded researcher, you of course would like to have that your data are as well open as fair if possible. Not all data can be open. Some data, of course, have to be closed for privacy reasons, for sovereignty reasons, for security reasons. But all data can be fair, and especially the metadata can be fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable as principles, which are still being developed. So my logo would be for people working in this domain, make your data as fair as possible and as open as possible. And with that, Marco, I hope that I have given the core of this type of development which is needed and where we, with the Dutch program on open science, try to make a contribution towards moving with the whole population in that direction. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Karel. I see there's already a question coming in about software. I suggest that I keep that for a bit later on when we also talk about infrastructure and software.
Okay.
So I would like to move on now to one of the guests at the table. That's Kim. Welcome, Kim. Glad if you can join us here in The Hague. So Karel already mentioned in the area of rewards and recognition, things really need to change. Now you work at VSNU, the National Corporation of the Universities in the Netherlands, and you're program manager for rewards and recognition. So can you say something about the importance of open science in changing the way that we perceive rewards and recognition?
Yes, indeed. I work as a program manager for a broad coalition of universities, university medical centers, research institutes, and research funders from the Netherlands. And how I think you can see it in two different ways. I think that open science and developments to change the way we look at career assessment in academia, that they are strongly intertwined, and you could see this movement on changing the recognition and reward system. You could see that as part of the open science movement, but you could also see it the other way around. I think that at least to really make this change in opening up science, to really make a change to sharing data and sharing your research, it's really necessary indeed to reward and recognize what scholars do in opening up. So we should really reward scholars that publish their work open access, that share their data, share software, and involve the public in setting the agenda, setting a research agenda, and doing research themselves, like citizen science.
Yeah, yeah. There's also a generation issue here, and we will come back to that a bit later on when we have a video question about that. Let me now move on to Sarah de Rijkeren, CWTS. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Your institute does research on research evaluation. You're very much involved also in open access, but you're also involved now in a new recommendation by UNESCO on open science. Open science is an international, global development, a movement maybe even. What can you share with us on the way that open science is perceived by a standard-setting institution like UNESCO?
Yeah, I'm really happy that this is happening. So we were this body was created last year. This Global Open Science Advisory Committee. There's member states from across the globe, so from the Arab countries to South America and to our regions. And indeed, as you say, it's an international standard-setting instrument, these recommendations of UNESCO, so they really are consequential. And they are about open science, so it's really taken to that global level. And I think that is really good, because sometimes we tend to think, and we are frontrunners in the Netherlands, but we are also in Europe where we are frontrunners. And now this is taken to the global stage. And specifically for the recognition and reward discussion that Kim also just mentioned, there's one specific recommendation in the first draft that we wrote. That was published at the end of December. The second draft will be published by the end of March. That deals with this need, this crucial need for transforming research culture and for breaking the barriers in how we assess researchers.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. There's a third topic that we want to address in this session, and that's skills. I think that very much taps into what you just said, Sarah. Karel, when it comes especially to data skills, so what can you give us an overview of how we currently are assisting, supporting researchers to acquire the skills that's needed to work with data?
Yes, I will try, and maybe it's good to refer back to a pre-meeting we had yesterday, the Dean's meeting. You were present, and the Deans started to discuss actually what is the way to have data stewards present in your university or in your faculty or in your department, which basically already brings the fact that they accept that data stewards are needed. So the discussion on do we need data stewards or not does not even take place anymore. In the Netherlands, this is a given thing, and MEO is a stimulation program for local, what they call digital competence centers with data stewards to help universities getting through this transition. And we have to recognize that data become a more and more important aspect of the whole set of activities, the whole set of capabilities of doing science. And the question is, should all the researchers thus develop all the capabilities needed in order to curate, as we call it with a beautiful word, their data? Or would it be better that they get help with that and do know where to find this help, do know what is needed, but get people like data stewards helping them in doing this as part of their research process. I think the second way is better than the first way, otherwise you have to train all the researchers in all the details of handling data. Nevertheless, to get there, we don't have this at the moment, all data stewards everywhere, although the Netherlands is doing relatively well in this domain. In order to get there, again, additional effort in this transition period is needed. And then we need to train these data stewards. There's, as far as I know, in the Netherlands, only one training program at HBO in Leiden, if I'm correctly informed, to train data stewards. And we definitely need much more capacity to train these people. At different levels, people can be, let's say, like a sort of technician at the lab level, working together with the researcher, or can be at the level of a department overseeing the work being done and helping a set of researchers, or can be even at a more strategic level of the university or in the country in order to bridge between, let's say, the services offered by the e-infrastructures, the compute, the store, and the connect, to the data infrastructures which have to be filled with the data from the research. So yeah, I think there is, we're all well on the way, but we're just starting.
Yeah, okay. And just starting, I think that's a good bridge to talk about people who are also just starting as researchers. Now we have a video by Jessica Sjoerds from Leiden University, and she has a question to you.
I am Jessica Sjoerds. I am an assistant professor at the Institute of Psychology at Leiden University, and I'm also a founding member and one of the coordinators of the Open Science Community Leiden. So we see that open science is being adopted more and more, and that also funders increasingly demand the adoption of open science in research. This is of course very good news, but this can be devastating to early career researchers' future careers if the advice is to go fully open at once. especially if the incentives and the rewards in the academic system are not completely adapted to the open science practice. So what is your advice for early career researchers?
So the advice for young career researchers. In the meantime, I'm looking at the technicians. There are some comments coming in via Menti that the broadcast is stuck. I'm not sure if that's on the viewers endpoint, but maybe you can have a look at that. I get several messages about that on my screen. But going back to the question of Susika, Sarah, maybe is open science, could that be damaging to the reputation of a starting researcher?
I think it's a valid concern that a number of us in the system should really be conscious of. So people in administrative positions, but also group leaders, and of course early career researchers expressing their voice. So one of the things I think is important when we talk about that level of the group is to really start, if that doesn't happen naturally, a dialogue with the people that are supervising you, and to ask for how are we going to go through this transition phase together. We're not going to suddenly shift from one system to the next, so they're not going to be assessed suddenly from in one mode. It's going to be a transition. So how can we as a group, together with your supervisors, have a discussion about how to organize that properly?
Yeah, it's a total shared responsibility.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Kim, because you work a lot on reward and recognition, I'm sure that you talk with a lot of young researchers as well.
Yes, so we had a few weeks ago also a national festival on recognition and rewards, and we are very glad that a lot of young, I would rather call them scholars than researchers, that quite a lot of scholars were there also on the table, but also in the audience. And I would like to call them scholars because we see academic careers as broader than only research careers in our program on recognition and rewards. So we see very different talents. So you have people in academia who really excel in teaching or in outreach and connection with society or in leadership roles. And I think that how we like to change academia is that all these talents should have a place in academia, and not only the one-size-fits-all researcher who publishes in high-ranked journals. So there should be different career perspectives, and I hope indeed that young scholars discuss how they view their own careers with their peers and with their supervisors. But I think, and it was already mentioned, that the funders in the Netherlands did already change. So in the talent schemes of NWO and Zonneweg, they changed. They ask now for a narrative CV. And they ask scholars to present their key output and not a complete list of publications or indicators like the H-index or the journal impact factor, but really choose which output you think is crucial, explain what your vision is on your own career, and please also pick open science outputs like data sets. And I think that, well, it's a culture change. It takes time, but these committees at NWO and Zonneweg, they're really changing, and they're really looking at a different way than some years ago to research outputs.
Very good. Yeah. What I forgot to mention when I introduced you is you're not on the program, but you're actually stepping in for Rianne Letchert, the Dean of Maastricht University, who is co-author of a report that was recently published. She was rector of Maastricht University, and she was co-author of the publication Room for Everyone's Talent, where this is very much addressed. So what's going to happen with this report? You were involved in that as well, weren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so we published this in November of 2019 together with the universities, the funders, Royal Academy, research institutes, and after publishing this position paper, Room for Everyone's Talent, we really started a national program. So every university and the research institutes and the Royal Academy, they founded a recognition and rewards committee. And they're responsible for this debate and this dialogue in their own communities. And several universities already presented, one university today, already presented a vision on recognition and rewards for their university. So we're really really working with these communities on this
Excellent.
culture change.
Yeah, wonderful. I see on my screen that the video is up and running again, so good work. I think we also have just a few minutes for a few of the questions that came in, and I think one of them is really for Karel. I think that came during your animation, and the question is, fair data is important to scientific progress, but it's orthogonal to open science, because also closed data can be fair. So I think you also mentioned fair open data. So can you elaborate a bit more on these concepts?
Yeah, as I did in my last statement, you should make your data as fair as possible and as open as possible. And by as fair as possible, I mean the principles of fair are still being further developed. So what is as fair as possible now is something different than what is as fair as possible a few years from now. And as open as possible means that not all data can be open for privacy reasons, as I mentioned, and for security reasons. Sometimes data have to be closed, but they can still be fair. And then you can give access, that's what the A in fair says, to certain groups or individuals or in certain situations or with certain limitations. And that exactly offers the possibility to also work with, let's say, privacy sensitive data and with data that are for security reasons not able to be open.
Yeah, yeah. We talk about that later on in the third part of our session this afternoon with Jette Ranis from SURF.
Maybe I should add that especially also for industry, it's important that this option is there because their data can still be fair but not necessarily be open for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, we need to finish our session now because we need to move on to the second part of our plenary session where we will talk with researchers. So I'd like to thank Kim and Sarah for joining us. Wonderful that you were able to come here in this snowy environment of Sound of Vision where we are in The Hague today. So in the second part, we will talk with researchers and to introduce that, we have a video by Marianne Joël. She's the Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences of University of Groningen.
On behalf of all the university medical centers in the Netherlands, I'm very happy to say that we fully support the open science movement. And the use of open science and also data sharing became rapidly evident last year during the start of the COVID situation. We decided as university medical centers to share our data, and that helped us to get better insight in the progress or the characteristics of the disease, but also in the treatment options. So that was a very recent example of how useful it is to make repositories of your data in a fair way. I think it learned us in general to store our data fair, not just medical data, but also data from population cohorts, and use that for new experiments. Now, on a more personal note, I'm a scientist as well, I would like to say that also in the realm of preclinical research, so let's say more bench work, it's also very useful to have your data stored in a fair way and to share it with your fellow scientists across the world. It helps to guide experiments, new experiments, in a good way, and even you can reduce your number of animals by using old data. So, entire field of science, medical science, biomedical science, I would say we support open science and fair data policies wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Marianne. I think that was a beautiful statement that you made. Welcome to the second part of our session here. We have two new guests here at the table. So, Chris van der Tocht, he's Senior Researcher and Data Manager at the Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience, and Anton Akhmerov, who is Data Champion in Delft and a theoretical physicist. Chris, I would like to ask you, coming back to the video message of Marianne Joël's, what she stresses is the importance of continuity in data, also not only just in that we do open science in the here and now, but that we can reuse data from the past, also with the view of sustainability. Now, you are from the open source software community, so how do you see the opportunities and added value that the concept of open science brings to research, having this long tradition in open source development?
Okay, that's a really wide question, but to begin with, yeah, I've been already some 30 years in science, and I'm still doing science, and I've seen really a lot of changes happening over time. And to me, FAIR is something, you know, it's a new concept on the horizon. I think, and maybe also the people from my generation still see it as something that's top-down, something, you know, and, oh, that's a nuisance, we have to start doing things differently. And that is why I would like to stress how important it is that we take a bottom-up approach. And yeah, to link on to what she was saying, I think if you take, for example, GitHub, which I think is a really nice, it's a shame it's part of Microsoft, whatever, but it's a really nice development. And you can see how many people are collaborating together in GitHub on developing software. And I think this is the way that should go. I mean, this is how we should be doing science. It's nice. You can put your software there, you can put documentation on it, you can discuss with other people how things are. This is, I think, the way to go.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we also said in the introduction of the festival earlier this afternoon, that this is not just a festival about a fancy topic. It's something that's at the heart of what we do.
Right.
And there's a tradition in the way that we do things, and open science is not just turning the corner completely to the right. We build on experiences and ideas that we've had for a long time. Yeah. And we talk a lot about data and fair data, since you're a software engineer as well. So what would you recommend the people that are attending our festival here to pay attention to software in the context of open science?
Yeah, I think the important thing about software in science is that we are really talking about data and the linkage between data and software. And that is going to be really important. It's not just going to be about putting your data in a nice repository. It's about linking that data to scripts so that people using those scripts can understand how the data is organized and how they use that data. And I think with proper scripts, with proper documentation with those scripts, I think that's what we need now.
Yeah, so that taps very much back into the skills that, that Karel was mentioning. Anton, I introduce you as a data champion. I think that's a formal title at Delft University, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
So what make you embrace open science and become a data champion?
I cannot name a single event. Rather, it's open science. First of all, open science is very diverse, and largely it's a bunch of small things that all make sense also individually. And we are talking now about how everything should be done properly with software documented and developed and maintained. But what I also struggle to convey to my colleagues is already the absolute minimum is so much better than not sharing. So the minimal workflow with open source software or research software and open data is zip, upload. You don't have to do anything else, and it's already so much better. So somehow I never stopped to think twice. So as soon as I saw something that seemed to be better than what I'm doing now, and that would apply, I would just adopt this as a policy, and of course try to also share the idea with others, which I guess is how I ended up where I am.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice to hear that how natural it is for you. But were there, when you started as a scholar or as a researcher, were there any barriers that you experienced, maybe within yourself even, to embrace open science principles, or were there any barriers in your environment in which you work that you have to overcome?
Not so much barriers as a lack of tradition. I think I was certainly in a privileged situation when I had a sufficient autonomy and support where people were okay with me doing what I prefer, but as natural as some of the ideas seem to me, especially in hindsight, to others they are revolutionary and counterintuitive. So So I say that it's very little work to adopt better workflows, but if you did not try these, you tend to overestimate the failures or the risks, the amount of effort you need to invest, and that's why you don't start.
Yeah.
I'd
Chris?
like to comment on that.
Yeah,
because,
please.
There have been some surveys by large publishing companies in the past, not so long ago, Elsevier, Springer Nature. And what comes out of those surveys is that how difficult scientists find to organize their data in a presentable way when they need to upload it to an archive. So it really is important to start thinking about those things when you start collecting your data.
Karel, you want to comment on that? Yeah.
Yeah, my reaction would be, Chris, if you didn't think about it beforehand, then it's difficult. But if you think about it beforehand and then work according to that plan, it's not difficult at all. It gives you more structure. It might be even more easy. But
Right.
afterwards, if you first do your PhD and then look at your data and then you say, now I have to make them fair and have to put them in a repository, then you are in trouble.
Right, so you agree with me that we actually need incentives for
Absolutely.
people to start
And
doing
that's
that.
what we have said on this table several times today already. I fully agree with you. Without incentives in the right direction, things are not moving in the right direction.
We have a question on video talking about champions by Frank Miedema from Utrecht University, who is an open science champion in itself, a long-standing champion. And he has a question for you.
I'm Frank Miedema. I'm the chair of the Open Science program in University Utrecht. I've been an open science advocate for a long time. I started this in 2017 in the European Union, and then I also did it at the national level. My question to you now, specifically today, is what can such an open science program at the institutional level, for instance in Utrecht or at your university, but also what can at the national level being done to help you engage and to practice open science? That is the question I pose to you.
So you said, there's a lack of tradition, more or less, in your context. So in what way will a program at your institutional level or the university level or even the national level, how will that help to change the direction of us all?
There are several parts of the aspects that I would like to mention. First of all, while the researchers may be relatively ready to adopt open science procedures, universities, in my experience, often aren't. So technically, if one looks at the letter of the law, the regulations of TU Delft, researchers aren't even allowed to publish open source software. And this is not for a profound reason. I've discussed this at many different occasions, and this is largely just because the whole concept was overlooked. The open source software or software policy was copied from the patent policy. Patent policy is restrictive, perhaps for a decent reason. So this is the situation now. So certainly carefully reviewing the policies and ensuring that they do support open science workflows is a necessary first step already in demonstrating willingness. Also in our university, I really enjoyed the data stewards program. In part, perhaps largely because of the great outreach that they do. Essentially, every of my colleagues has interacted with a data steward. So that's a relatively small team. It's I think about one per faculty. But still, they manage to make themselves visible and get the ball rolling and start the slow transition, often painfully slow, but nevertheless.
There's impatience in youth, isn't there? Yeah.
Should be, otherwise
Should
we
be,
don't make
absolutely.
any progress.
Yeah. Chris, so how would a program at the institutional level or the national level help you?
Yeah, well, I think that policies already start with very simple measures like, telling researchers, look, you need to store your data on this location. That's already important because that makes it accessible to more people. And these are really simple things to start with. You don't have to come with very difficult ideas or whatever. It's in many cases just simple measures that you can take.
Yeah. In the meantime, of course, a question to the viewers. If you have any questions to Anton or Chris, I don't see anything emerging, so I think everything you're saying is super clear. But Karel, maybe you can also reflect on Frank's question. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think at the national level, we should coordinate the things that are being done by the different organizations. And I mentioned 3 types of organizations: research performing organizations like universities or institutes, research funding organizations like NWO and ZonMB, and service providing organizations like SURF or GEON or eScience Center or DANS, or you name it. These 3 types of organizations should coordinate their efforts to support the researchers. That's what I think at the national level can be done. Then at the university level, I think the leaders of the university should not only mention that open science is important, but also give the means and the possibilities and see to it that the regulations fit with that. And indeed, I was one of the sessions today about software. With software, it's very often the lawyers talking to the lawyers rather than the researchers talking to the researchers on how it should be done. And especially with software there is too much involvement of that kind, which creates limitations that can be taken away at the level of a university. And then I think from the department level on, it should be done by the researchers themselves. They should jointly talk about this, they should discuss their efforts, and they very often do. So it depends on the level and the type of activity you're talking about.
Yeah. I think this was also something that we discussed yesterday with the deans.
Yeah, indeed, the deans are a very important level in this, let's say, stepwise approach, and it should be as well top-down as bottom-up. If it is not bottom-up, it's not going to happen. That's very clear. Yeah. Only top-down never works. But if there's nothing top-down, then the coordination also is lacking.
Yeah. Well, of course, and we hope with a festival like this also to contribute to that kind of social coordination. I think that's also a very important part of open science, isn't it? Okay, we're about to close this session and move on to the 3rd part. So I'm looking at Anton and Chris. Is there anything you want to say, encourage the people who are attending the festival?
I think if I were to say to say one thing that I would like everyone to know is that every small step counts. There is a long road towards open science, and it takes a lot of expertise and everything. But there are a lot of very simple things that everyone can do already right now.
Excellent. I think that's a very good way to move forward. Chris, is there anything you would like to?
Completely.
That's a great. Okay. Yeah. Actually, no, there are now a few questions for you coming in. So I think we still have a couple of minutes, isn't it? So apart from the topics discussed here, like research data, citizen science, and open access, what will be the main challenge in the new National Open Science Program for the coming 10 years? That's already a bit preluding to the next part of our program, so I suggest that we keep that message for the next conversation. But how could existing communities support the development of good practice in open science? I think that's a very good way that also taps into the question we had about open source community. So is there any lessons to be learned also, maybe Chris, for you?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that they should be enabling a bottom-up approach. I think that's so important right now.
Yeah. Yeah, support the grassroots initiatives, work together.
Yes.
As you said, make small steps, every step counts.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us here at the table. And I suggest that we finish this session now and that we move on to the 3rd part of our plenary session, which is about infrastructures and the future of science, of open science and open science policies. Okay, so thank you, Anton and Chris, for joining us here. And for the next session, we will be joined by Jette Ranis, the CEO of SURF, and we'll have a conversation together, of course, with Karel. Okay, thank you. To introduce, just hold on just one minute. To introduce the 3rd part, we have another video, this time from Sabine Wildevuur from Twente University, who's making a plea for citizen science.
Citizen science is a way to open up the scientific process. And it's a way to link the more top-down approach from academia with a more bottom-up approach when you start with societal challenges. It's also a way to link different stakeholders to the scientific process, such as persons from society, from governments, from business and from research. In Design Lab at University of Twente, we are part of a larger research project called TopFit Citizen Lab. And the researcher that is embedded in Design Lab and which part of a large group of researchers is working on the framework, the research framework for citizen science for health. And citizen science requires that you work in a transdisciplinary way, so that you cross it's cross disciplines, but also linking it to society. And what you see happening is this cross-fertilization before your eyes when you apply citizen science. It's not easy. People need to get used to it. But if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what's happening in citizen science. I hope that in 5 years' time, we have a network, a Netherlands Citizen Science Network. As a result of the report we have been written about citizen science under the heading of the National Netherlands Open Science Platform.
Thank you, Sabine. I think that's a very interesting plea and a very important part of what open science entails. Welcome to Jette Ranitz, CEO of SURF, for our third part of the session.
Thank you.
Jette, I'll come back to you in a moment, but I think a very good question to Karel will be, can you say something about the position of citizen science in the national program that we have?
Yeah, I think what was mentioned just a minute ago, it would be great indeed to see if we have 5 years from now a really active group in the Netherlands working on this. This was not mentioned in the original Open Science Plan from 2017. And over the years in the discussions we had, it became clear that citizen science itself is important, but could be part of the open science movement and discussion. And therefore we have added it to the things we have been doing. The citizen science is sometimes seen, in my view, a little bit too narrow. Citizens counting birds in the garden, for example. That's one way of having citizens involved in doing in this case, data collection on birds. But it's much more than the involvement of citizens in doing observations or sharing data. There's also, as we have done in the Netherlands, the national roadmap on research or on science, the activity that citizens are asked actively to participate in. What questions should we address as researchers, as research organizations? And I think it is also the other end of the spectrum, the results of our research, the results of our science work. It should be important, it is important, I think, that citizens are also involved in sort of an evaluation, not the scientific evaluation, but the evaluation on what has come out, because this has been paid by public money. So it's worthwhile to look at the end as well. So for me, it has 3 components. Involvement of citizens in one way or another in asking the right questions, involvement of citizens in one way or another in evaluating the outcome of science, and yes, very interesting and much more exciting is the involvement of citizens in one way or another in doing the research itself.
And not just citizens, but also public institutions. Of course, that's collaboration between science and public institutions is very important. And I think that leads naturally to look at SURF and its role, its supporting role. I think in the Netherlands we can be extremely happy and lucky to have an organization like SURF supporting us in such an excellent way that we can also really be a best practice.
Thank you.
So thank you, Jette, for all the efforts that your organization is doing for us. What I would like to ask you is, how does open science affect the activities of SURF and the further development of the infrastructures that we have built together?
Well, very much, of course.
Yeah.
Because when you think of the word infrastructure, you tend to think of hardware solutions like storage or a high-performance computer that we've just bought a new one. But increasingly, you see that you need much more. You need software to be able to visualize your data. You need something to be able to manage your data so that you can share your data and put all the data that your group has assembled together and analyze it. And in order for data to be findable and accessible and interoperable and also reusable, then you need an ecosystem, really, of which hardware and software are a part, but also agreements on how we implement metadata. And this is something that SURF is, of course, very much involved in, because when it needs to be automatically available, this is what we do. And we work together, of course, with universities, with medical centers, because it's not something that just happens within the SURF organization or as a service that SURF delivers to the institutions. A lot of this is happening at the institutions as well, and so we invest a lot in training also, because I think that the first sort of line of defense, if you will, the first point where you can go as a researcher to ask your questions should be within your own group, within your institution, and institutions really need to invest in this. But when it becomes more complicated, or when you see that it's part of also connecting to international structures, of course that's where SURF it is there to facilitate this and to build and buy, if necessary, to make it possible.
Yeah, the international dimension, we will address that shortly with Karel again. But I have a follow-up question for you, and I think that also relates to some of the questions that were sent in via Menti, so please keep them coming. What about security and privacy, which are very important concepts that researchers are worried about, or they are confronted with issues related to that? How does that fit into open science and infrastructures? What?
I think anybody working in IT knows that this is very important. And of course, as the research becomes more and more supported by IT systems and IT software that you're using for your data, security also becomes important. And some of this you can take care of automatically by programming it in the right way, or by securing your data. And this is something, of course, where SURF collaborates with the institutions already, because this is, has been an issue for a long time already. On the other hand, it's something you also need to think about as a researcher yourself. Who do you want to access your data? Is there a reason to keep data private? And that is, those are flags you need to put in as you go along, and I think that requires, as I said, a lot of agreements also. It's not just the hardware, it's not just the programming, it's also making agreements on who gets authorized to do what and make sure that that is implemented.
There are a lot of soft elements in
Of
infrastructure.
course.
Yeah, absolutely. You already mentioned the connection to international developments. Now, Karel, you were recently appointed as the president of the European Open Science Cloud Foundation. Association, isn't it? Congratulations on your appointment. Can you say a bit more about the impact that initiatives like EOSC will have on us?
Yeah, if you look at the possibilities of combining data, then I dream the following. Interoperability of hardware is far ahead of the interoperability of data. So if I use a Mac computer, she uses a Dell, I saw, somebody else are using HP, we have high performance computing, we have networks, and they work together, of course. There are difficulties, it's not always...
We take it for granted.
We take it for granted. So the interoperability of hardware is a thing we take for granted, as Jet rightfully says. The interoperability of data sets we do not take for granted. Now, theoretically, suppose that you could combine every data set relevant from research with every other data set coming from any other discipline relevant for research. Like we can now combine all the web pages on the World Wide Web, because we can link them to each other. What would be theoretically possible? Well, the most of the combinations is garbage and is not useful, but there are many, many combinations could be useful which we cannot even dream of today. So if we don't do this over the whole spectrum of data, and if we don't do this over the whole world, because researchers are working not in isolation in our country or in Europe, it's not going to work. Now you have to start somewhere. We have these things going in the Netherlands. SURF is doing a large part of it with respect to, let's say, the e-infrastructures part. They're helping us in, let's say, organizing the data infrastructures part. At the European level, therefore, we have created EOSC, but it doesn't stay there. There is a similar development going on in China, there's a similar development going on in the United States, and there are developments going on in other regions of the world which we connect to, which we talk to. And if we talk about standards, which Jet was mentioning a minute ago, then these have to be absolutely worldwide international standards, otherwise it's not going to work. Same as with the World Wide Web. Also there we have worldwide standards, which grew from certain places, many cases from the United States. In this case, I think Europe is ahead of the pack, and we could, in the European system, be moving a little bit faster. But ultimately, the aim is to have this possibility which I was been dreaming of. And I think it's much more than 20 years away. So it's a long run, as we also discussed with the researchers. Yeah. It's not something we can do overnight. Yeah.
But every small step counts.
That's what they said, so Anton, I agree with them.
Said, isn't it? Okay, there's a question for Jet coming in, relating also to standardization in a way. Yet, what is SURF doing to make sure that software and platforms that we use for open science are publicly governed and open source?
Well, I think that's something we invest in already and have invested basically for as long as SURF has existed. And I think we need to do two things, because there are commercial providers and we need to negotiate with them and we do so in a very tough manner to make sure that they comply with our public standards as well, and that we make sure that they compete among each other in order to not just give us the value but also the right price. And I think it's very important alongside of this to promote open source alternatives and to make sure that this increases in strength and also in quality to be able to provide whatever we want them to do. Yep. But this doesn't happen automatically, and I think some of the services that we are seeing are really good, but it could use an increase.
Yeah. And maybe it's good to add here that in the European Open Science Cloud, we are therefore setting the rules by the community of researchers and the science community, and not by the, let's say, private parties that go for profit. Yeah. They are involved, they are welcome to join the team, but they are not involved in setting the rules.
Again, there's the grassroots element also. Okay, excellent. There's another question for you, Jet.
Great.
Okay, so the SURF plan for large increases in storage. New projects are looking at storage requirements of the order of petabytes. The new AI labs will also require massive storage. So what are the future plans that you have?
Well, I think this is something we need to decide together with institutions. And I think the first order of business is to come up with a more data-driven approach, in the sense that not all the data require the maximum privacy protection or security protection. Some of the data is actually already public, but just needs to be kept in a relevant set. For those kind of data, keeping it in a commercial cloud is really not that much of a problem. When you talk about health data, that is a problem. Yeah, yeah. So I think, first of all, we need to decide in our communities what is the relevant level of protection and how much that leads to the conclusion that you need to keep it in a cloud owned by SURF or owned by the university or owned by a hospital. And in second instance, of course, as a national community, we need to make sure that we have the right amount of storage available in our collective assets. And some of that will be SURF, and some of that will be part of the university assets. And basically, SURF is as rich as the universities are because they pay us. So, you know, there are boundaries in terms of what we can afford.
Yeah, yeah. And how's it at European level in EOSC?
Well, some people say the universities are very rich, so SURF must be very rich as well. The European level is the same story. And I fully agree with Jet that those things that can be done by some commercial providers for storage should be done, and they can then have in competition have the best prices for those data where this is possible. But yes, we do need to have the, let's say, possibility to keep it within our own institution or hospital or whatever. By the way, data negotiations between the regions, United States and Europe, for example, see to it that Google is now enforced. If people want to have the data sets in Europe, they can have the data sets in Europe. So these type of discussions are also important, not done by us, but done at the European level in order to, let's say, set the proper rules. But it is an issue. There is more and more data. So apart from the fact that we do need more storage in the future, we also do need to have the discussion on what data shall we all store and save, and who decides on what data are thrown away. Suppose the PhD student is gone, the staff member is gone, who owns the data? No, the question owning the data is not the right question, I think. The question is who is responsible for the data, and then who can decide that this data should remain or should not remain.
Yeah, yeah. As a librarian, I'm sure you understand that for me, that's a question that crosses my path every day.
Yeah, and exactly for that reason, I think librarians play a very important role in making these kinds of decisions and giving us advice.
Yeah, excellent. I have, because this is the final session in the plenary part, where we have this kind of discussion with guests. I have one question which is maybe a bit very generic, but still it's a concept that's underpinning everything we do here today. And that's the concept of cultural change.
Yes.
So open science requires a cultural change. You read it in all the reports. So can you elaborate on, what kind of support and what kind of efforts we can provide to speed up that kind of change that is needed to do this? Maybe yet you can...
Yeah, well, I think basically in any profession where ICT enters the way you work, it requires really overhauling your practice. And I think the many examples that we've seen today in all of these sessions demonstrate that the people who are successful in this have really changed their way of working. And if we want to do this across the board, of course, that's going to take time, because any kind of change of that order of magnitude takes time. But we're in a very lucky position, because only today already there are at least 500 very enthusiastic people in this festival, and this community needs to grow. And I think we need all 500 of you to spread the word, and we as SURF and the National Programme for Open Science are there to make sure that you don't remain the pioneers, that you get more and more friends within your own communities, within your own institutions, and what we want to do, of course, is link this community, the bottom-up community, to the community at the top, and make sure that the tone at the top enables what you need to take this further.
Thank you, Jet. Karel, a final word on cultural change?
Yeah, for me, cultural change comes from two sides. One is the community we have today. A lot of young scholars, as Kim called them, that drive this cultural change and the wish for cultural change and the need for cultural change. But without the help of, let's say, leaders of universities, of research organizations, setting the example, it's not going to work. Yep. And so I plea for the, let's say, boards of the universities, the deans, the heads of the department, but also the group leaders, the older professors, if I may call them that way. I'm one of them, by the way. They should set an example and show the way and help their younger researchers to make this change possible. Because I have seen over the years, the younger researchers really want this.
Yeah. Now, of course, there's another organization that is also steering us in a way, and that's our Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, of Sciences, I should say. We have a video message from our departing Minister of OCW. So can we please have that video message from her?
Good afternoon. I'm happy to see that even though circumstances are challenging, this Open Science Festival has not been cancelled. The current crisis is tough for all of us, and I'm relieved to see that scientists from all over the world are guiding governments out of the crisis. I also believe it's safe to say that the power of open science once again proves itself. For quite some years now, long before COVID, open science has been marked a high priority by the Dutch government. We strive to make open science the norm for all publicly funded research. The COVID crisis has further underlined the importance of collaboration and open scientific data, articles and insights. Apart from documents full of ambitions on open science, I believe that you, as scientists and leaders of academic practice, are key in achieving a culture of openness. More than ever before, open science is about taking action, on the institutional level, for instance, through local self-funded open science programs, on the national level as well, in a national program on open science, and on the international level too, for instance with the establishment of the European Open Science Cloud. Only by working together on all these levels, the Netherlands can continue to take responsibility as one of the leading forces of open science in Europe. Today's festival is yet another example that proves how powerful our community is, and I know all of you are passionate, hard workers. That's why it's important to once in a while take some time to acknowledge each other's efforts and results. The Open Initiatives Trophy does exactly that. This trophy praises teams or individuals that promote open science in local communities in the Netherlands. To all nominees, I would like to say, keep up the good job and be an example to generations of researchers to come. However, a true competition must have a number one. And I'm honored to announce this year's winner. It's an initiative with huge impact on the practical level. The winner of the Open Initiatives Trophy 2021 is the Netherlands ReproHack branch. Congratulations! For now, I would like to thank the organization for all of their efforts to make this festival a success. And I'm sure the festival was useful and inspirational to all of you. And let's hope the next Open Science Festival is one to attend and enjoy in real life.
Thank you, Ingrid van Engelshoven, our departing Minister for Education, Culture and Science. And at the table we are joined by the winner and the runner-up, and it's up to Karel to do the award of the trophy. Karel, please.
I'll try my best, Marco. Welcome, Daniela. You are representative of ReproHack team in the Netherlands, but you were also nominated as a person in this rally, if I may call it that way, for your open science efforts as PhD students. But this trophy is for the whole ReproHack team from the Netherlands, and is organized this morning also a pre-festival workshop. From the committee that looked at it, and I'll read their statement, ReproHack is a very high impact initiative and a real team effort. With the popular ReproHack one day's hands-on reproducibility hackathons, they are increasing their awareness of software reproducibility in a very inviting way, ensuring that people can be comfortable sharing their codes with others in a worthwhile manner. The fact that the team consists of PhD and master students makes this initiative even more special. And then we have two runners-up before I start handing the prizes. And Egon, you're one of the runners-up. Egon Willighagen, you're assistant professor at the Maastricht University. And the other runner-up, who could not be here today, unfortunately, is Stefan Heunes. Egon, with boundless energy, you have been committed to open science for many, many years. You are critical, first of all, to yourself, and you are critical when it comes to practicing open science, but especially also to all the developments around open science, as we see in university policies, as we see with the publishers, as we see with the scholarly community. Alongside your work as a scientist, you're also engaged with the larger open science community projects like Wikimedia and Wikipathways. I follow you on Twitter, by the way, and you're very active there as well in showing the way to what is essential, what is needed, what are the right directions. Well, Stefan cannot be here, but I'll probably talk. I'm not sure whether I should talk to that camera or that camera, but if they do their work properly, I'll look at that camera. Stefan, your work is a great contribution to your own field, but also very helpful for researchers from other disciplines. Despite the burden of finishing a PhD and looking for a job, and homeschooling in your case, you almost single-handedly managed to keep the open science community of Eindhoven up and running. You contribute a lot to the awareness, raising the awareness for sharing data, for code and the community, and giving them a clear, accessible way, making it easy to follow for people who have not yet mastered all the data and all the open science jargon. Thank you very much for that. And I have a prize here for you as well, and I'm sure it will reach you in some way or another. Then before I'll hand over the trophies or show the trophies and then put them on the table because we cannot physically hand them over today, a special mention goes to Mark Schelbergen. He's a PhD student from the Delft University who is encouraged to keep up the good work in raising awareness with his peers and leading by examples by using the open methods. And with that, I would like to first of all show the winner, the first prize, and the trophy for that, Open Initiative Trophy. Here it is. If Marco dusts it off, you can take it on. And the same holds for this Open Initiative Trophy for the special prize number 2 and number 3. Let me show it to the camera again. Oh. here you are. And congratulations.
This should have been, of course, a massive audience, but unfortunately, that's not how it is. Thank you, Karel, and congratulations. We will clean the trophies. We have our materials here, so it's safe to hand them over. It's a pity that we can't do that, but, well, we're getting used to it, aren't we? That these are the current circumstances. Okay, we are going to finish this formal part of the festival. Thank you for the questions that you put on Menti. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get all of them into the conversation, but we are going to reuse everything that you wrote in Menti in future activities that we do. So so rest assured that it's not just for now. This is something that we will take on for next events. We will have a short break now, and in that break we will show you a video from Open Science Communities. That's a local bottom-up initiative which initiated in 2018 in Utrecht by Anita Eerland and Luc Brinkman. And we now have 13 communities, and we're still counting. So we're going to show you a video of that. After the break, we will have a social program for you, and there are 2 ways for you to engage in that. We have a Zoom meeting led by Jeroen Sondervan as our moderator, and we also have a virtual environment, GatherTown, which is very nice and very inspiring and very social to participate and meet your peers and share the experiences that you have had today at our festival. So don't forget to look at the website of opensciencefestival.nl. You can also find more information about the winners of the trophies. You can find more information about the Mingle and Meet that we're going to take in a couple of minutes. And of course, we all look forward to seeing you, hopefully in real life, at the next Open Science Festival. So thank you very much. Thank you, Karel. It was a pleasure to do this.
It was my pleasure.
And hope to see you in our social program after this short break. Thank you.
The global challenges that we're facing today show how strongly we depend on science. Therefore, it's crucial that scientific articles and data are immediately accessible to all. Currently, this is not how science is organized. This needs to change.
So it is great and exciting and invigorating to see the energy coming from communities like the open science communities in the Netherlands to promote open science practices more broadly. They are the real engines of the culture change movement.
In an open science community, you learn from colleagues who already took steps to make their research more open. We are all here to learn, meet, and cooperate. Community members are encouraged to engage with people outside academia, teaming up with citizens, patients, industries, or governments to increase the societal impact of their work. Communities cooperate with institutions, policymakers, and providers of research infrastructure to create an atmosphere where open science can flourish.
In 2018, Luc and I started the Open Science Community Utrecht at our university. Colleagues from all disciplines and career stages quickly joined us, and we helped colleagues at other Dutch universities to set up their own communities and connect with us.
At University Utrecht, we see the benefits of the open science community. They make open science, the program that I'm chairing in Utrecht, and make it very visible. And they help us engage people. They help also to shape the program. We are delighted to have them, and I think for every university in every town, it would be an advantage to have an open science community like that.
The format of open science communities is not only spreading within the Netherlands, but also across the border, with local communities in Sweden and Ireland. Together, we form an international network of open science communities. Our network now consists of 13 local communities with over 700 researchers ready to put open science to practice.
And we don't want to stop here. We want to see open science communities all over the globe.
We need researchers like you to start a local open science community. We have an onboarding program to help you out. Go to our website, check out our starter kit and build your own local open science community in just 4 steps. Start your own local OSC and connect with us.
Okay, so where's the catch? Do you have to pay for our starter kit? No. All training and materials are available for free on the internet, so that everyone can benefit. So check out our Open Science Community Starter Kit and join our network. The future is open, and we invite you to be part of it.